All right, very good. Welcome everyone again to our presentation. This is our resume lab or resume workshop as we like to call it as well. So we will cover some of the basics when it comes to resume development, the different sections, some formatting, things like that. It may not be comprehensive. It's not going to be necessarily a super deep dive into any one section, but just to help you kind of confirm or verify that you're on the right track, getting your resume developed. So if you need to take a break, if you're at work or you need to step away or for whatever reason, please feel free to do so. Like I said, this will be recorded so you can come back and pick up where you left off. And after the fact, if you have any specific questions, you can email us at careers@wgu.edu. We also have a series of what we call drop-in sessions. We actually had one a couple of days ago. We try to do them following the webinars if we can schedule it that way. But the drop-in sections are just really good ways for folks to gather to get some questions answered. And it's not a presentation, but it's sort of like open office hours. So those are scheduled on our website for career events. And we have a series of drop-in sessions that cover various career topics. So what we'll be doing today is we will be covering applicant tracking systems. We'll talk about what they are, how they're used, how you need to be aware of them for your own good as you're writing your resume. We'll do a walkthrough of a sample resume just to go through the different sections. We'll cover some common do's and don'ts, and we'll look at a job description so that we'll do a review of a job description so you can know how to use it as you're writing your resume. And then all the questions that might be raised during the presentation, we'll have some time at the end to cover some of those with the time that is allotted for our presentation today. So let's jump right into the applicant tracking systems. These are a little bit in flux. And what I mean by that is with AI on board, these are becoming to be a little bit more intuitive. They're becoming to be a little bit more insightful, so to speak. So it's even more important that as resume writers, we know what specific keywords and information to include so that the AIs that are being driven by or within the applicant tracking systems can really be able to pick up our resume better. Most employers are going to use an applicant tracking system. It's the most efficient way for companies to collect applicant information, for them to sparse out, pardon me, for them to sparse out contact information, what you're applying to, shunt it toward the right department, shuffle it to the right department, and then being able in a very efficient way to scan your resume for specific keywords to see if you are qualified for that job or not. And if you're not, then they will either send an automated reply or it just sort of, dumps your resume. I don't know whatever better way to say that, but that's pretty much what happens. So what do you want to do in two critical ways to help survive these applicant tracking systems? First of all, I would recommend you stay away from templates that you can easily find online. This is a quick sample. It's one that we just pulled from online just to put an image here. But if you look at it, you'll see there's somebody's picture. There's a big dark bar to the left of the page with contact information that looks like it contains little icons. The education section is on that bar. The skills are on that bar. The contact information is probably in the middle of the white space that you see. The problem with this is that it is not ATS friendly. Pictures do not go on your resume unless you are applying to be a movie star. That's true. So unless you are going into the theater and you need a headshot, then you'll have a headshot and your resume will be on the back of that 8.5 by 11 picture. Otherwise, no picture. No big bars of color, no icons. This is just in the wrong format and setting of resumes. A resume writer did not design this. Probably an artist or a desktop publisher in graphics artist may have designed this, but they're not employers or recruiters. So I would just stay away from these and use a typical Word document that's easy to scan, it's easy to edit, it's easy to change things around. Uh, that is your best bet to survive these. It's also easier for those ATS to scan for keywords. Sometimes the templates use text boxes. They may use headers and footers, which cannot easily be read through ATS scans. So keep it simple, a nice Word document. That's going to help you with what we call a keyword rich match rate. That match rate will be the way you use those keywords from the job descriptions. And then we're going to get into that in just a moment. So that is really the best thing you want to keep in mind. If it can't read it, like I said, if it can't read the keywords or you have a wrong description that's in there, then if it will either put it out in the rejection pile and send a message, or sometimes I've had students come back to say, I've applied to many jobs and I get no responses. So employers are not obligated to reply back to you. But if there is a way for them to say, thank you for applying, we will hold your resume for future consideration, something like that, you know, first thing I look at is let's look at your resume. Let's see how it's designed, how you have worked with it, that sort of thing. Now, more on the ATS, and this is just as we're doing a little bit of a deeper dive with this. PDFs are not good to use unless on the job description, in the instructions on how to apply for that particular job, if they say you can apply with a Word document or a PDF, then fine. Definitely you want to defer to the employer's instructions. But if they say, or you can only find a reference to a Word document, then only use the Word document. Sometimes those PDFs are, again, they're not scannable by the ATS, even though ATS applications are becoming a little bit more intuitive with AI as their engine. Right now, I would play it safe and just use a regular Word document. Keep it simple. No heavy formatting, no embellishments, columns, tables, colors, that sort of thing. A good, clean Word document. Make sure it's a Word document, not a Google Doc or even a Pages from a Mac. Sometimes those can't be read or be opened by companies. So just a good Word document is the best thing to think of. Now, if you want to write a resume, you have your resume, you're like, well, how can I test this out? Is there a way for me to play around with those applicant tracking systems just to see what, how do I grade? What grade would I get? So if you're using AI to write your resume, that's not a bad idea. It's certainly okay if you're going to use ChatGPT to get a resume started. You can put in your information, your contact information. If you have an existing resume, you can include that. You can also include a job description. Literally, just dump it all in. Really, dump it all in that ChatGPT. But then the prompt you'll use will be something like, write me a resume based on this information for an entry-level cybersecurity job. And see what happens. see what it looks like. Then you want to tailor that resume on the job description. You want to make it your own. Don't just say, well, here it is. I'll print this out and send it on. You want to get in there, fiddle around with it, massage it, change things, make it your own, because those Chat GPT and other AI tools are not foolproof. So you want to really be able to go in there and use those tools for inspiration. Use it to say, you know, I don't know how to write a good summary profile that goes at the top of my resume. Well, you can use a Chat GPT or other tool to start it, but then you want to be the one who makes it more your own for that. So that's going to keep you safe in using it in an ethical way. It's going to help you to keep your own tone in how you speak or write to some degree. So that's the best way to use those tools. Here are some links you can go to. I'll keep this page up for a moment. I don't think you'll be able to click on this. You might when you get the video, maybe not, but if you want to go ahead and write these down, you can do that. JobScan, which is listed at the bottom, is a real good one. They're all good. I've used JobScan more often. I think you get maybe 3 to 5 free scans with JobScan. And I think if you register or if you sign up, don't have to buy anything, but if you sign up with JobScan, they may give you a couple free extras as well. But JobScan will also do your cover letter, so they'll scan your cover letter as well. But for your resume, these are some good ones to work with, to play around with. It'll give you a score. It'll give you recommendations. It'll give you suggestions, things like that. My recommendation is if you do use this, when you're ready, say I've used all the tools at my disposal. I'm almost ready to apply for these jobs. Go ahead and send it to us for a review so that you'll have actually human eyes be able to look things over and help you out. If you have not used our service to do a resume review, I'm putting a link in the chat. If I can find it. So here is a link to our resume page. You want to follow those instructions. There are specific steps that you want to take for requesting a resume review. There are 5 steps to follow for that. So make sure you follow those so that you can get a more efficient and timely review sent back to you. All right. So the next page will be just some really quick, interesting stats. A resume is usually scanned or looked at by recruiters. I get that word out. Recruiters will really look at your resume for about 7 seconds at most. At first, they'll do that for the most of the time. They'll look for obviously your name, your contact information, your current job titles, where you worked. They'll go back and look at, you know, your start dates, end dates to make sure there are no gaps. Then they may go back up to your summary to look for specific keywords. They might look at your education. So they'll pop around on your resume to just skim for the most relevant information. Then if it's looks good, looks pretty good, not too bad, they'll pass it on to the next stage. That next stage may be a little bit more of a slower analysis of your resume. So it works, it gets through the applicant tracking system, it goes to HR, an HR person or persons will look at skimming your resume. Then they'll say, from all of the ones we have seen, here are the top 20 that we believe are the strongest. And we're going to pass it on to the hiring manager of the department. And then they will look at that and they'll break it down and they'll go slower in looking at your resume So that's a real nutshell description of the process of how your resume works its way through you applying to the job until it gets to the hiring department. Now, here is a sample of a resume. This is not the ultimate example to use, in my opinion, personally, because there are some things that I'd like to put on here that I would do some changes. This is the start of a foundation that we can explore. So at the very top, where your name is, your first and last name, I would not do it in all caps. I would just have one that is in what we call mixed case for that, just so that it doesn't look like a jumble of letters. That's the easiest way to say that. In your contact information, I would still put your city and state, because I'm hearing employers still saying that they like to see where people are coming from, even if it's a remote position. They like to see, what your city and state, phone number, email. If you have a LinkedIn URL, that'd be great to put that on there. If you're in the tech industry and you have a GitHub URL, I would put that on there as well. If you have projects you want to use as a kind of a case of your good work, examples of your work, that would be good to use. Then your professional summary or your profile could be the next section. I'd say probably 5 to 7 lines is a good number to use. This is your 30-second commercial. This is probably one area where employers will say, if this is all I read, is it enough to compel me to read the rest of your document? This is your opening statement to the employer. That's why it's important that it contain those keywords from the job descriptions, so it doesn't look like a generic resume, because one size does not fit all. I'll say that again. One size resume does not fit all situations. Now, with that being said, there are some situations, if you're going to a job fair, if you're posting this on LinkedIn, you can't keep, changing it out, right? So instead of writing your summary to a particular job, write it to your industry. If for example, if you're in cybersecurity, and that's ultimately what you're going to target as your employer in your career trajectory, then your summary qualifications should be about the most common elements of cybersecurity. Or if you're in accounting, or if you're a teacher, then the most common elements that you see according to the industry, if you can only write one resume, that's the best way to do it. Otherwise, when you're applying to individual jobs, you do want to tailor your resume to that particular job. Now, the next section can be fluid. So I used technology, or the School of Technology, or IT students as an example. The next section on your resume could be a technology profile. And we have examples in our resume page, on our resume site. Step number 2 is where you can go to find samples of other resumes. So step 2, you'll find some templates and some sample resumes, and you'll see on the IT resume, there's a section where is a nice kind of a matrix of where you would put operating systems, programming languages, databases. You can add your own cybersecurity tools, anything like that. Web development tools, front end development tools. Anything that would be unique to your situation. You can justify. I mean, you can kind of manipulate that and use that, and that can go with healthcare. It could go with business. Any of those things. You can create your own specific competency section. That looks very professional. That gives you a real good edge to showcase your best practices in your own use. for the employer. So that could be a really nice addition to your resume. Then your next section can be the professional experience. And there are a number of ways of formatting your professional experience. You can just put simply your job title, company name, city and state, and your start and end dates. And then bullet points underneath that to highlight not everything you did, but choose your strongest and most relevant points that you want to display that show maybe transferable skills into the company that you're applying to, or really fine tuning and kind of laser pointing your most relevant actions and things you did at that job that are most relevant to the job description. You want to make it as easy as possible for the employers to read those bullet points and find the information they want. You don't want that relevant information to be stuck in the middle somewhere or down at the bottom, because that can mistakenly communicate that you didn't really read the job description. Otherwise, why not put the most important stuff at the top of your list? So on this example, you'll see optional. Sometimes folks will put a line or two about their role, and they'll say something to the effect of, acted or professional standing in as an accountant with strong GAAP experience working in taxation and private equities, or something to that effect, with finance, with a finance background. So a little blurb about their role, and then the bullet points would reinforce that role. It's optional. It looks good, it sounds good, but it's not required. But I like to show both ways of looking that over as well. If you look at the bottom and you want something like a framework of like, how do I do these accomplishment statements? How do I write these? What's the formula that might be good to follow? This is a good formula. An action verb, a task that's relevant to the job you're applying to, and then a result. Now, the results maybe sometimes cannot be really quantified. So if you can, that would be great. If you were in a sales position, for example, and you can quantify how you have increased sales in your market, that would be great if you can show that. Numbers kind of pop out at employers so they can see that. All right. I didn't have enough on that page, so I had to do it second screen. So again, in the education section, you had this here. Before that, let me ask real quickly. There's a question that popped in here. So may I please ask if the timeline could be out of order to show most relevant professional experience? Not really. If you, I know that happens, and that's a real thing that happens. The problem that presents is that employers will look at if you'll notice the right edge of the screen, I have all the dates. When you start, if the dates are all kind of jumbled, then it's hard to see, did you have a consistent work history? So it's a good point, because if you had more relevant jobs that were 2 or 3 years ago, it'd be good to see those first, but the issue again is like the dates get kind of jumbled up. I would probably just keep it in a more chronological order that's there, and because that's just the order that you worked and got that experience. That may not be the perfect answer that you might be looking for, but I would try to keep it in that way. Now, in the education section, pretty straightforward. If you're getting a master's degree, then you want to put that first, your most current degree that you're pursuing. So here we've got a master's, an MBA, the date to the far right of your expected graduation date, Western Governors University. The university has changed a little bit um, of some ways that it's operating. I've been here for over 10 years. When I started, a little bit after I started, there was, we have chancellors in different states, right? I'm in Dallas. So there was WGU Dallas. We've got WGU North Carolina, WGU Washington, things like that. Today, the university is beginning to really kind of market itself as one university. We don't want people to mistake and to say, oh, are all these different campuses or places that are around? No, we are one WGU. So with all that being said, go ahead and put Western Governors University, Salt Lake City, Utah. That's our headquarters. That's where we live, so to speak. That's where the president lives. So go ahead and just use Salt Lake City, Utah, for the city and state for the university. Now it's optional, but if you're lacking the work experience in a particular field, you can highlight relevant courses that you've taken that really align to the jobs that you're looking for. That could be a good idea to highlight your academic experience that needs to supplement a lack of hands-on experience. Your capstone project, if you have worked on or you're developing your capstone project and you're doing it in such a way that is aligned to the kind of work you want to do, that's a good idea. Then you can mention a real quick description of your capstone project. Now, if you have your master's, then you want to also put your undergrad degree, regardless of what the topic is. That's just the protocol of resumes. The formula is if you have a master's, then you include your bachelor's. But that does not pertain to if you're just getting your bachelor's and you have an associate's. You do not include the associates. Just have your bachelor's. Why is that? Because most of the time, the jobs that are being out there defined will require at least a bachelor's degree. The associates would not really be a qualifying element that they can use to see if you're qualified. So one question that came through is, what if you have 2 graduate degrees? I would list, this is kind of a gray area. Let me say this in a couple of ways. I would list the one that you're taking now because it's most recent, perhaps, and the one that's most relevant, if that makes sense. The reason not to list both of them is that you could look overqualified. So yes, Kashi, that could be a strategy that you may need to do. If you're getting your master's degree, you're pursuing your master's degree now, but you're applying to a job that only requires a bachelor's degree, then you may exclude your master's off your resume for the time being. And that has happened with students who are career changers and they have a bachelor's that's relevant to the job they want, but they're getting their master's so they can excel and, increase their earning power, all that kind of business. But if they don't have the experience, for example, they may look overqualified or not qualified. So it's kind of a gray area. We need to look at several things. We need to look at the job description. What are they asking for? We need to look at your experience. What do you bring? That sort of thing. That's a good question, Dave. So why would you not want to look more qualified than they're asking? Isn't that a good deal? They get more than what they're at. The reason is, and this comes from employers. This doesn't come from Cliff Guerin. This comes from my interviews and my kind of working with different employers and recruiters. It's not a great answer. You may not agree with it. The number one, we're playing trivia. The number one answer that comes is that employers will say you may look too expensive. So you don't want this to get in the way. And I had that comes directly from recruiters to say, if they come in and we go through an interview, and this has happened to me during interviews, they will try on the spot to try to negotiate a higher salary than what's being offered or allowed by HR because they have a higher degree or more qualifications. The other answer is that employers are sometimes concerned that you'll go through the process, you'll get hired, and because the job is maybe not at the scale of your more than qualifications, you might get bored, stay for a year or two, and then leave for something that's more challenging. Another quote directly from employers that I've interviewed with. They're more concerned about going into the whole bidding war because you're bringing more than what's being asked for from the job description. So the strategy with that, if that ever is the case, like, well, how do I work with that? Well, what do I do with that kind of information? Edit your qualifications. You're not watering it down necessarily, but you're able to show this is what you're asking for. This is what I bring. Now that you're in the company and you're working at the job that you've applied for and interviewed for and was given, then you can begin to apply your more than qualification skills, your extra degree that you have, or the second degree, and begin to build up from within. You got to get in the job first before you can build up into it, if that makes sense. And that even happens here at WGU. We've had staff in different departments that have a bachelor's degree. They get their master's from WGU, and then they get a management position here at the university where they couldn't have done it before. So they get into the company first, begin to understand operations. They show their leadership, what their qualifications are, what their qualities are, what their capacity is, and they move up from within. That's one strategy that the folks have used. Or they'll stay in that job for a while, get the skills they need, get the experience, build up what they need for their resume for 2, 3, or 4 years. Then they may look for other employment that matches their qualifications. It's complicated sometimes. It's not easy to parse out the details, but that's one way that I've seen that. No, Dave, I don't know if if I'm understanding. So the question is, so if I'm currently working on my bachelor's degree, but jobs I'm applying for are not necessarily in the same vein as my degree, should I omit my educational journey? Well, it depends on the details. So that might be something, what's your degree in? What are the jobs you're applying to? If they're jobs that we call feeder jobs, that will eventually feed, give you the experience that you need and feed into the career that you're eventually going for, then it might be necessary and it might be worth following that degree. I'm sorry, that career path for that. Okay. Okay. Um, that makes a lot of sense. So if you're looking for labor jobs, retail jobs, something to help pay the bills, keep your focus on school, things of that sort. What's your degree, if you don't mind putting that in the chat? Accounting. Okay. I have not, what you could do, um, for example, in your summary qualification, I wouldn't put in your summary qualifications. Um, I don't think I'm not seeing any red flags with that necessarily. Because if you're currently in studies, right? You haven't graduated. Okay. I I don't see that as a major red flag, especially if you put expected graduation date, you know, that will tell the employers you're simply in school and you're trying to get a job that's going to, just help you make it through, so to speak. Um, I would recommend that you do is, and we won't get into the details because we don't have the time, unfortunately. But I would do your job search and work through Handshake, because Handshake, the employers that are in Handshake will know you're in school, and if they're posting jobs that are going to be maybe in sales or retail or something to that effect, and you're in the College of Business, then they're going to be a lot more lenient and flexible in looking at those, that it doesn't in the same vein as your degree. So that might be one way to do that. But I wouldn't fret too much over it. But if you want more detailed discussion, that might be something you can set up an appointment to really talk through the details with that. I think we'd be glad to help you out that way. So I hope that helps with that. With that being said, let me put in where you can make an appointment. And I really want to emphasize to please go through the resume resources first and have your resume reviewed by us first before you make an appointment, because we don't do resume reviews on the spot necessarily. And so if you give the work first, then we could talk about the details later. Dave, if you want to make an appointment, for example, and you want to talk about how to navigate, this, this area that you're working with, getting a job for easier focus on school, but what do I do with my resume? That could be something we can also discuss. Okay, back to our topic. So at the very bottom in red, I wanted to make sure I touch base on this because folks will ask on a resume, there seem to be, how far back should we go? There's no science to this, but typically 10 to 15 years max. That being, I know that folks, especially in healthcare and in as educators in the Teachers College, they may have more experience than this. But typically 10 to 15 years, find a good stopping point with that, and that's about the right place to stop. Otherwise, that's all they need to see. Your skills or experience may get a little bit more dated as we go back further, and it begins to make your resume longer and longer and longer. So you want to avoid doing that. And speaking of that, with the question of number of pages, there's some gray with that. Typically, the 2-page resume is not going to be a deal breaker. What I typically say is if you're changing into a career that is new and is totally different than what you did before, then a 1-page resume is going to be probably the best, so that you're not listing job after job after job that's really not relevant, with bullet points. So you do want to list the jobs, even if they're not relevant, but you don't need to put lots of bullet points. Here's the formula that you could put. You can put job title, company name, city, state, and then your dates to the far right. Okay, things like that. For example, way back in the day, I was a waiter. I worked at a restaurant, but if I were applying to going to my first real job, let's say my first real job was applying to being a career advisor at the University of Texas in Arlington. Well, if I put that I was a waiter or a server at a couple of different restaurants, I'm not going to put a lot of bullet points under that because most everybody knows what a server does, right? For the most part, you serve food. You work with customers, fast-paced environment, but they simply want to see what the what your work history is. And yes, Dave, that's the right way. I would say the month and the year that works would be good. You don't want to put the day. The day is irrelevant. I tend to do the month and year like you put it there, September 2022. It's easy to read. It's easy to, to look at. So that's what I would choose. All right. Now, here's another little twist on the resume. Some folks, and I had one person who worked in a very unique job, and he was going into the School of Technology to get his degree in software development. The job had very, very, very little transferable skills that would ever be relevant. So I recommended that he do a skills-based resume, and this is what this looks like. You would still have the top of your resume as we described earlier with your contact information, professional summary, but then put your education at the top because you want to highlight now not your work experience. It's something absolutely totally irrelevant, but your education, because that's what you're pursuing as part of your professional development. Then skill sets that align to his new role in in software development. So they could be things such as develop multiple software projects, and he may list the projects. Detail oriented and professional development with programming languages that he could list the languages, Python, C#, things of that sort. So this is just an outline that could be relevant to that. And then at the bottom of that would be the work history. Just like I said, job title, company, city, state, and the dates. I'm going to throw this back to our resume page. If you go to our resume page and you go to step 2, you'll find a functional or skills-based resume template that you can use if you need to. Now, some quick do's and don'ts. This is going to repeat some of the things we've already talked about. And that's perfectly fine. We can reinforce that here. So you want to make sure that your resume includes your first name and your last name, but not a title. Don't put, accountant or, human resources manager. The reason is that if you're applying to jobs that may not necessarily be in line to that title, then your resume might be rejected. So to play it safe, just use, and I've seen that recently. I've seen folks put that in there and they send me a job description and it's not the same thing. So then I have to go back to say, oh, well, you send me a job description, but you have a job title and it's not the same thing. So this could be a problem. Choose a classic font like Calibri or Arial. Verdana is good. Folks will use Times New Roman, and that's perfectly fine as well. These are easier to read. They're quick to skim, so they make it a lot easier for employers to read. Don't use a fancy font. Don't try to find something that's going to be like a script or anything like that, especially with your name. Just type your name on like a cover letter. That's going to be simple and easy to read. If possible, limit to 1 page. As we said before, that's not always possible. If you get stuck and you try and you give it your best try and you're still getting a page and a half, that's okay. Once we go through the review process, we may find ways for you to shorten that up, and we'll give you those recommendations and tips. Keep consistency in formatting. And what I mean by that is with your bullet points, make sure they're all lined up, nice and straight. They're not jagged on the page or out of alignment. Your dates are to the right edge of the page. And again, they're nice and lined up. They're not staggered throughout the page that's there. So just make sure you proofread. Proofread. It's funny. I don't know if you've ever heard this, but Mark Twain said, write drunk, but edit sober. And what I mean by that is write your resume, get it all down, do the best you can, give it a rest, step back, then come back to your resume, look it over again with fresh eyes, you know, edit or anything you need to, proofread it again, that sort of thing. So that's going to help you with, you might have missed something that's there. It's always a good idea to just give it a little bit of a break and then come back later. Do the best you can to be intentional with your content. Customize it to your target company the best that you can. And I know that there are times to where that's not possible. Like I said, if you're writing something to post on LinkedIn or you're going to a job fair or something to that effect. But using the job posts, using those job descriptions are really going to be very, very helpful for you. And it will help show that you're not trying to just use one resume for multiple jobs when you can edit those to make it more customized. On the right side, the things to avoid would be do not copy the job description in white text to make it disappear on your resume, hoping that the applicant tracking systems will push you through. Yes, that happens. That's happened a couple times. I've seen that. How did I find out? Well, they had a word that was not recognized by the dictionary on Word, and so it put a little red squiggly line, and that red squiggly line was just hanging out there in space. So I highlighted the entire document. I changed everything to black type, and then at the very bottom in very small print were all these lists of keywords. When and if that's found out, that's cheating. And that's how employers will see it. They'll see that you're trying to take a shortcut to get through, and you're immediately kind of kicked out of the running. So you want to avoid that, right? I don't see this very often. I think I've seen it. I think I've seen two the last couple of weeks, which has been a really, really, really long time since then. But references upon request do not go on resumes. That has dropped off a long time ago. When you get to the final consideration of a consideration of a job prospect, they will ask you for references. They will ask you separately to send a list of references. So you don't need to put that on your resume. Avoid things like tables, text boxes, borders, colors, icons, pictures, footers, headers, because they're not applicant tracking system friendly. They're not ATS friendly. So you want to avoid that so there's no delay in your application. Avoid the use of personal pronouns like I, me, my, we, our. The reason behind that is simply a writing style. So everything has its own writing style, right? So a resume is a different way of writing a term paper. A term paper may be a different way of writing a newspaper article. A newspaper article has a different writing style than if you're going to write a novel. So for a resume, they know it's your document. You don't have to identify yourself in your way you write your statements or your summary at the top. It may sound awkward. It may look kind of weird. There's a way to do it, but you want to avoid that. Also, because employers know that this is like a really fundamental rule. It's like one of the most basic rules with resumes. So you don't want to come across as not knowing how to write a resume. I know that sounds kind of cruel, but you don't want that to mistakenly happen and be disqualified. I know it sounds very shallow, but sometimes that has happened. Or you get kind of knocked down on peg. It's like, well, we'll look at some of the others first. We'll put his away. We'll come back to it later. Font size has always been a question. Should I keep it 11 point or 12 point? I'd say 12 point, in my opinion, is still kind of big. It looks like you're just trying to take up space. So your bullet points at least can be in 10 point. Your headings like employment history, education, certifications, that can be 11 point. Your name can be, I'd say 16 point is a good size. So hopefully that helps a little bit if you need that. Now, I put in here to review a sample job description just so that folks can use this to know more than, hey, am I qualified for it? But when you see words like the ones I put in red are ones that are really going to be a very large part of this job. You know, you're going to be a person that would be a community, you know, you would lead community development initiatives. So you need to know something about community development. Customer service, because you're going to be working with a lot of people, vendors, community members, things like that. Customer service shows up several times, so I put that in bold. Collaboration, communication is really strong. So these would be samples of like, these are the keywords you want to put in your resume and make sure they're there so that when that ATS does the scan, it's picking these up. I just hope that that was helpful. I just wanted to give you an idea for that. Now, to find, I wanted to put this in here too, kind of give you a map on how to find exactly where to go for your resume resources. So when you go to our homepage, click on Career Tools at the top bar. Then over to the right, it's going to look like in the middle of the page under Resource Library. Click on Get the Job. Then that's going to take you to, because we have lots of things under Get the Job. It's not just a resume, but it's multiple things that could be used. But to the left, you'll see resumes. Click on that, and that will take you to the steps that I talked about. So just follow these in order. If you need a template, and you're like, well, before I do that, I want to get a better template, maybe. Then go to step 2, open that up, find a template that you like. If you click on it, it will download to your computer. Then come back here and start with step 1. And that will take you through what you need to do to go through our requirements for a resume review. Now, if you're in the Teachers College, read at the very bottom, we have specific resources for a Teachers College for resumes. So that might be really helpful if you need some really specific direction if you're in the Teachers College. All right. Well, now it's time for Q&A time. If you have any questions based on what we talked about today, and I appreciate those of you like Dave have put some questions in there too, so that's been very helpful. But now I'm going to open up for everybody else. If you have something you want to, I think WebEx has muted everybody, so I'm sorry about that. But if you have something you want to type in, that would be great to look at. All right. So that's a good question. So if you have a employment gap, then the best thing you can do is put a placeholder that's there. If that placeholder is something where you have been pursuing your education or you've been doing something that still is relevant to the career you're pursuing, then that's what you want to put in there. That's probably the best way to do that. Is that's what they're going to look for. 6 months is not really a huge time. Post pandemic, folks have had up to a year of a gap at times. That has not been a red flag that I have heard from employers. If it's a obviously 2 or 3 year gap, then they want to look for that placeholder, depending on what it is, depending on what was going on. They typically would like to know, you know, were you pursuing or doing something that's relevant to your career, volunteering, learning a new skill, learning something from your industry, something to that effect. You know, you could put. I'm gonna say, let me give you an example. If I can spell here, principles. Let me say accounting skills development, LinkedIn learning, certificate, October 2023. I'm kind of making this up, but so if you did something like on LinkedIn Learning, you picked up a few skills, you got, like a micro credential, a micro certification, and that falls within that gap, you can put that in there to show that you were doing something that was relevant from that. Let's see some other examples here. I'm switching from trades to computer science. I'm assuming that is CS. Should I use a skills-based resume since I don't have any relevant experience outside of school? It's possible that might be a good idea to do that. Can you share with us what you're coming from? You don't have to, you don't want to, but oh, okay. All right. You know what? I would put that as an electrician because there's still your brain, excuse the pun, your brain is wired. sorry, is wired that you're still thinking in that kind of way, even if it's computer science, if you're going to software development or web design or anything like that, use that your parts of your thinking process, thinking logically, very detail oriented, knowing and understanding how to read a schematic, knowing how things should be wired correctly, all of that kind of stuff really has some real good transferable aspects. So I think that would still be relevant to use. Dave, I think so. I have seen students put that under their education. They may put awards and recognitions, and then they would put, um, Excellence Award, Western Governors University, or Excellence Award in Innovation and Strategic Thinking. So yeah, because that shows that you have been recognized for something that kind of goes beyond just coursework, right? And if it's going into a field that is going to be useful for you to be a good, innovative, and strategic thinker, then this reinforces that. So I say yes. I think so, Amy. That's a good question. If the resume length cuts off at 10-year mark, then the previous roles that are relevant to the position I'm seeking, can I say over X number of years of experience, even though the resume cuts off at 10 years? I have also seen like this. I don't think this will let me. Hold on one second. No, it did. Okay. So you could put an additional experience section if it fits there. Then you could put job title, again, company name, city and state, but no date. If the job title is enough to clue in the reader to say this is still relevant, then maybe do it that way. But under that heading of additional experience, I have seen and heard that as one strategy to include that. Now, I think practically thinking just in the real world, um, if your resume is not going to be super, super long, like 2 pages, and it goes back into 2002, 2001, that's too far back, I think. If you're thinking, let's see, 2024, 2014, if it's back into like 2008, something like that, I don't think that's a deal breaker, especially if it's really strong, relevant experience. But if you want to just, what does it look like and play it safe, perhaps have a separate section, additional experience, and then see how that looks. Okay. So, Kristen, um, yeah, part of me has said, especially if you lack experience, to include the boot camps you've attended and showing the skills you've obtained. If I were a job applicant and I'm hearing from senior level applicate or employers that are saying they don't like boot campers, I don't know why, because they're kind of out there and we do kind of advocate that if you need experience. I would still think about putting that on there. But if I'm hearing from a recruiter that says we don't like boot campers or boot camps on resumes, I'd probably follow that because they're the ones that will be hiring you or interviewing you. But if they're employees, like you said, it's like, well, other employees I hear, people I talk to say, oh, we don't like boot camps. Um, I don't know why, but that's something I would ask, maybe look into. Why is that not a likable thing? Let's see, another question. Is it good to initiate contact with the hiring manager for application status after a few weeks? Okay, good question. And yes, I would do that. If you apply to a job and you have not heard back after a few weeks, then you may not, if you can get the hiring manager, that's great. But typically, I would contact the HR department and just let them know you're following up, that you've applied for this position and you simply want to know if that is still available. Um, you're following up with your application. That's the terminology I would use. Kristen, that's good feedback. I may want to look into that from our side. I haven't heard anybody either way talk about that, but if you're hearing it and that's something that you're coming across more often than not, then you want to make yourself look as qualified as possible. So if you have boot camp experience in your background and you're hearing that they'll just pass you over, then take it out and see if that has a different effect. All right, folks, we are over time, and I am sorry about that, but I'm glad that we hang out a little bit. I just kept talking. Here's how you can find us on our website. And again, if you want to follow up with an email on any questions, you can certainly do that. If you call into our phone number here, you're going to get a voicemail, and we call it the Hunt Line. And just leave your information, and then somebody will call you back either that same day or the next business day. So that is our presentation. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to stop the recording.